Hi, welcome to The Journey. I'm Julieann Hartman, and I've got an amazing show for you today. My friends from Phoenix, Arizona, the Boop family, had a horrible situation happen in 2013. Gina Boop had a headache and it turned into a stage 5 brain aneurysm. This is part 1 of their story. I can't wait for you to meet them. Welcome, Bud, Gina, and Rachel. I'm so glad you guys are here. I am just overjoyed by the fact that you, the viewers, are going to hear a story about these three that you've probably not even heard before, because you're going to get the fine details of the story of what happened to Gina. And so you guys, we're just going to have a great time talking today and just getting it all out. So don't leave anything back. Okay. So we've got Gina, and then we have Bud and we have Rachel, the two witnesses of what happened. And so welcome, you guys. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
All right, so let's go to, what year did this happen?
2013.
Okay, so I want to detail, oh, I'm sorry, what?
July 8th.
Okay, so I want a detail of what happened. Well, let's actually go back a little bit before that. What was your life like? What was going on in the Boop house?
We had gone out with an interior decorator and stayed in our little cute RV and up by Flagstaff, Arizona. And we went that day to Williams, Arizona, went to a cute little Mexican restaurant, had a nice bite to eat. You know, it's in the pines up there, beautiful. And when we came back that night, I was sleeping and my heart was just pounding. And in the morning, I told Bud, gosh, my heart was just pounding. I almost woke you up. He said, well, you should have. And then we went down to Phoenix that day, and I just had this headache. Life before that, I've never had headaches. I've never had migraines. Very seldom get the flu shot. I don't even take aspirin. So we went down to Phoenix. I had this headache, and the headache that I had, I remember when I had her, I remember the pain of childbirth. And I thought, that's what my head feels like. I hurt so badly. And we went out for lunch, and I put my head down on the table, and I said, Bud, my head hurts so bad. And I said, my ears are filling up with water. And I said, you need to take me to the hospital. Not in my vocabulary. I mean, I very seldom go to the doctors. I just felt such pain. I couldn't believe it. Anyway, he says, okay, let's go. He called our doctor, Dr. Bales, who's on the video. And he said, there's a clinic right across the street. Take her there. And we went there, and I guess I passed out on the way. And then the rest, I was in a coma for about 17 days and in the hospital for about 6 weeks. I'm going to let them tell the story.
Well, okay,
I was
before
out.
that, so what was your spiritual life like before this? I mean, months before, years before?
I love God. I've always loved God. I've always felt like our family has been touched by God. Our family, we're healthy. I didn't know how literal his word was. So I remember years ago, I sold new homes and I worked nonstop. It was a great position to be in. And Bud said, I can't believe what I'm learning. And he said, this was with Andrew Wommack Ministries. And he goes, I just can't believe what I'm learning. And I said, and I was working like 8 to 10 hours a day. And I said, I'm glad you're learning this, because you never know when we're going to need this. So you keep going. I can't take the time off right now. So spiritually, are you ever ready for something like this? I don't know. So,
yeah.
So, but I'll tell you what, since then, I am so on fire. If you talk about being a Jesus freak, I love what God's word is. It's huge. I'm finding out it's bigger than what I thought. It's bigger than life. You know, it's power. And you have to, in my opinion, you have to renew your mind daily in God's word.
Absolutely. You know, it's interesting because we've got, you know, there's all kinds of different doctrine out there. And, you know, some people would say, you know, well, that happened because you weren't spending enough time with the Lord. And we know that that's not true. So, but what I love is that you've always loved Jesus, and you're not blaming God for anything. And some people do that. And so that's why it's like this pure love for him. I can just see it in your face, in all of you. And, you know, when catastrophic things happen, what's the first thing everybody says? Why, God?
Why did he do this to me? Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, but we forget there's an enemy out there, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like, oh yeah, we forget about him. Okay. So how about you guys? Now, Rachel, how old you're an adult now, of course. Were you an adult, like already living your life, married and all that when this happened, or were you still at home?
I was still living at home. I lived at home like up until the day that I got married. So I
love that.
No, I was still living at home. I was like 22 maybe, and they had gone out of town, and I was about to go into work. Well, they had come back in town, and I was about to go to work, and my dad had texted me, you know, meet me at this hospital, and our grandma was going through something with her gallbladder. So I assumed that it was her. So I texted him back and said, is it grandma? And he said, no, it's mom. Pray. And then I got another text to go to a different hospital. So I showed up there, and she was already unconscious, and he met me out in the lobby and took me back to the room to see her. They had put her in, you know, one of those ugly hospital gowns, and he prayed over her, and he told me to go outside and call Andrew Wommack's prayer line and to come back and tell him what the report was of what they said. And while he dealt with the doctors and everything.
Now, at this point, did you guys know what had happened?
I don't know.
We weren't really sure. They weren't sure. They had suspected that it was an aneurysm, but they weren't completely sure of that. So the next thing is what do we do? Where do we take her? And there's a famous hospital out here, or a group of doctors out here from Barrows Institute. And then there was a new doctor that was part of this Abrazo group out here that they were saying that the main doctor in the emergency room was saying, take him to this new doctor. So we were debating back and forth what to do. And I finally just asked the doctor, what would you do if it were your wife? And he said, I'd take him to the new doctor, Dr. Sapphire. So off we went to their central campus, and that's where the whole ordeal started.
So I have a question, and this might get a little personal, but I know you guys, you know, pretty well. And you are so kind and so sweet and so attentive to your wife. I mean, you're just like, now, were you like this before?
I would say, yeah.
He was.
He's always been obsessed with her.
You've always been obsessed with her?
We went to high school together.
Oh, that's so great.
Yeah.
Because, you know, sometimes when a life-threatening situation comes up, you know, things change. But I had a feeling about that, because you just look at her and you just are so in love with her. It is so sweet. It is so awesome.
Yeah, my dad taught her in 7th and 8th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were friends in high school. And then basically became reacquainted at about 12 years after high school. So, yeah.
Oh, well, we need to do a journey on that story.
Yeah, really.
It's so sweet. Okay, so now, Bud, what's going through your mind during this time? You don't know what's happening. You're not even used to this whole doctor thing, so you don't usually have a sick wife. So what's going through your mind, and how are you also trying to, guard Rachel's heart too as well?
At the time, when my mom had died, I'd gone through the Bible and studied everything in the first four Gospels relating to faith and healing. And I'd look up those words and you'd see the correlation. And then I'd go back to the root of where did Jesus have these fulfillments of basically the Old Testament. And then as far as when I got there, it was almost like you were in a car accident and you were pretty shook up and you're trying to figure out, you're trying to clear the fog from basically everything that's happening. So, I remember walking out thinking, where are these scriptures? What am I going to stand on? And the only thing that came into my mind, which I didn't know where it was with long life will I satisfy you. So I thought, okay, I'm going to stand on that. So I walked back in. We transported Gina over to the central campus of Abrazo. I rode with them in the ambulance. And then at that point in time, it was basically just standing guard, because time somebody would come in the room, they would have something negative to say. Gina's hand turned down and they said, oh, look, she's decorticate. And I said, she's not decorticate. Her hand's just pinned against the bed that way. And I straightened her hand out. And that was the start, because, I'm a nice guy in most situations. I was probably about as brutal because, it's your wife. It's like somebody banging on the
What did Dr. Sapphire tell you?
the door and they're trying to take your life. So it's not gonna happen.
No.
Jesus' word.
What did Dr. Sapphire tell you?
Dr. Sapphire came in and said, and it's in the video, once we put the little hole in her head, 10% chance she survives. But if she survives that, she won't survive the operation the next day. Mm. And I told them.
At this point, then they knew, when did they know it was an aneurysm?
When we got to the hospital, he was confident that it was an aneurysm based on the symptoms and her vitals and everything. So at that point in time was when I just basically just had to stand guard. And so when he said that, I said, those are great facts, but Jesus Christ has healed her 2,000 years ago. She's going to be just fine. And he gave me this real concerned look like, and he said to me, do you understand what I'm saying to you? And I said, yeah, I understand. And that was the start of everything. It was standing.
So, all right, Bud, I want you to elaborate a little bit on that. What, sometimes when we do that, people look at us, of course, like we're nuts. How did you feel inside when you're getting the doctor looking at you like you're crazy? Your wife is looking, a certain way. What goes through your mind? Is there any doubt coming in? Is there any voice of the enemy going, you're an idiot, Bud? Are you kidding? Is there any kind of that struggle, that battle going on?
There was that battle. I didn't acknowledge that. I wouldn't speak those things. Racquel and I had a pact that we were only going to speak scriptural. We were only going to allow people around that were positive, and that she was walking out of there in 30 days.
So, sometimes we can be people pleasers, right? And when the doctor will say, don't you understand what has happened to your loved one? And you're standing there going, yep, I understand, but that doesn't change the word of God. And sometimes you might feel like they must think I'm a complete weirdo. Did you ever feel that way? Because the reason why I'm asking you, on the journey, we get down to like the deep details of stuff, because this is things that people, our viewers, our precious audience is watching, and they're looking for those details of those things that they might feel as well. That's why I'm going to keep digging at you. Did those voices, did those thoughts come in that made you feel like you were, this guy must think I'm the biggest weirdo in the world?
Well, where we were drawing a lot of strength from was Alan and Debbie Moore. And in part of Alan or Debbie's testimony, she talks about, no, he's not going to be that way. No, and both of us would be walking down the hall, and one or the other would say, I rebuke that in Jesus' name. So yeah, the thoughts were coming. It's just, the thoughts were there. It was a black and white situation, and I always wanted to color it in a black and white situation. I didn't want any gray areas, didn't want any doubts. There were going to be no ifs about where we were at and where we were going to be. So yeah, they came up, but we had God had orchestrated such a perfect symphony of her healing, of different people who would input just little pieces of information.
I definitely think that he wasn't worried about what anyone thought of him or if he looked stupid, but he's never been that way. Ever since I've known him, not really worried what anyone thinks. So this situation even more so, because I think he felt like if we worried about other people's feelings, we were compromising our faith.
Now, how about you, Rachel? What was going through your mind? It's your mom. It's not your spouse. It's your mom, which is a little different, heart relationship.
We drew off of each other a lot. And yes, she's my mother. Her and I are very, very close, even before her accident. So the thoughts did come in my head, stupid things that don't even make sense. And it was just a matter of like, no, I choose to not think about that, not let it progress or snowball or go down a path of what ifs. It was taking each day and making it a mental note of, I'm going to choose to have reign over my thoughts.
That's awesome. And now what about, because obviously family members probably started hearing what was going on. How did you guys deal with the family members? We always have those family members that are like, what are you, crazy? How'd you deal with that?
He handled
most. You don't want to deal with it.
Well, it was mainly me. When a family member either would call or want to come down and see Gina, there were certain criteria. One of the family members didn't believe in what I was believing in, and told me, maybe it's God's time for her. And I said, I told this particular person, I said, look, the Lord's Prayer, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Is this God's will? Are there sick people in heaven? And I said, if you can't support me, don't come back.
How'd that go?
In the meantime, I'm in a coma. My tongue is hanging out my mouth. Not looking really promising. So you can't really look at me. You got to look at what he says, which is huge.
Boy, just talk about looking unto Jesus, especially with what he was looking at. It's like, did you look at her face and literally see Jesus and just not even acknowledge what the physical you were seeing?
The way that I got around looking at the physical is we created a little pictorial of her, and we had that at the bottom of her bed. And then I did just same thing in Alan and Debbie Moore, and I put a picture of us golfing, just finishing golfing, up on the ceiling. And so I taped it on the ceiling, put this at the bottom of the bed. And whenever I would look at her and it would hit me, the way she looked, I'd look down at the pictures. Because I'd tell the nurses the same thing. When you come in here, this is who you're taking home. This is who I'm taking home. what you see in the bed here is recovering.
So I just want to give our audience a reference. You keep saying Alan and Debbie Moore. Now, Alan had a stroke. Is that correct?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. And so they were on the healing journeys. I forget which volume that they're on. And that is with Andrew Wommack Ministries. And so, and then Rachel also had referenced Andrew Wommack Ministries as a prayer line, which is a prayer line that Healing Journeys Today also has access to, where all of our viewers can go there and get prayer. And so, Rachel, let me go back and ask you, what was the prayer that they prayed with you?
I don't exactly remember, but they spoke healing and a prayer of faith, which is when we initially prayed for my mom. It wasn't, Lord, please heal her, or maybe if it be your will. Like, it was like, no, Lord, we believe that by your stripes she is healed. What other verses?
We've got a whole
a lot of them.
We each day, one of the things that there were so many people that were asking about Gina that we created a little blog called Caring Bridge, and we told everybody to log into the Caring Bridge if you want to find out what's going on. So each day we wouldn't give reports on what the doctors said. We'd give reports on the steps that she was taking towards walking out of there, and then we would end it with scriptures. And so the whole focus was, if family members, if friends, whoever it happened to be, wanted to know what was going on, we would give them the login. So the deal with Rachel and I is that she would handle the blog and I would handle the doctors and nurses. So if anybody got out of line somewhere along the line, we would cut them off. And
wow.
It was just like when Jesus went into the little girl who was, and everything I was doing was, I thought, let's follow what Jesus did. So I like when he went in to tell the people that, the little girl, she's not dead. She's just, she's sleeping, and they laughed at her. Well, they put them all out except a few of the disciples. We did the same. There were very few people who could come visit her, and anybody who came to visit her either acknowledged the fact that she was walking out of there, no crying, no nothing. It's a celebration of God's eternal work, and that it can be your eternal work as well.
I just love it. Your tenacity. You were not going to let somebody from the outside come in and start changing, your focus. That is awesome. And if maybe you can just speak to our audience right now about that, both of you, Rachel and Bud. And we're going to get to you, Gina, but you were the one in the bed. So
yeah, I was sleeping through all this.
You're just sleeping, catching up with some rest. But Bud and Rachel, address the audience and let them know how important it was for you not to allow any of that to come in and to change your focus.
Well, there's a great story. I love it. Matthew and Mark both have this story in it of the boy he's got seizures, and one of the stories tells it from the dad's perspective. And the dad goes to Jesus and says, if you can do anything, heal him. And Jesus turned around and said, no, if you can do anything, all things are possible to those who believe. And the man said, I believe, help me with my unbelief. And that's the point of what we were doing, is we were separating the unbelief. Any unbelief that was there in the room, any unbelief from a nurse, a doctor, we cut it right then. It wasn't going to be spoken over her. We had a doctor come in with some interns and was speaking stuff over Gina right in the very beginning. And I thought, we're ending this today. And I followed them all out and told them, we're not doing this again. You're not coming in here and speaking over my wife again. And we had a debate back and forth. He told me all the things that were wrong with Gina. And I said, well, that's great. That's a great story, but Jesus Christ has healed her 2,000 years ago. She's going to be just fine. In fact, you're going to look back and go, holy cow, this is a miracle. The part of the miracle of that was I turned around to Rachel to talk about what he had said, and she said, Dad, it's like somebody put their hands over my ears.
Oh my gosh.
Hear it.
Okay, so what do you do now? All right, so I want to be more specific. So in the room, they're coming in, they're taking her vitals and they're looking at her, right?
Right.
They usually are saying like, this is going wrong, that's going wrong. So when they said that, that's where you stop them? Or did they keep talking? Like, how do you stop them from saying, we've got to do this to prevent this from happening and all that stuff? Like, how do you handle that?
Whenever they would come in and they'd want to talk to me, I'd say, first of all, anytime you want to talk to me, let's talk outside the door. Second thing would be is that they tell me that, and I'd say those are great facts, but Jesus Christ has healed her 2,000 years ago.
Great.
You think you need to do, but she's going to be just fine.
That is awesome, because that is a question that people have when they're in a hospital room in an emergency situation like that. And it's like, you want to say, stop, don't say, like, quit talking, or, shut your mouth. I don't want to hear these things. And so this is really good information for people to hear this. So, okay. So now, that she's had the aneurysm. What's the day-to-day look like?
Go ahead.
Well,
The
now-
day-to-day, as far as you're talking about now or then?
No, then. So the first day she's in the hospital, you realize, or they've diagnosed her with that. What happened day 2?
So day 2, they're worried about the pressure that she has in the brain. And that morning was when they were supposed to go in to operate.
Okay.
Operate is one of two things. They either go through the growing up and see what they can do. If they can't fix it that way, this doctor was capable of, or had the expertise of operating and removing the skull, part of the skull, and going in. He went in. It was supposed to be a 3-hour procedure. He comes out at 6 hours. He walks towards me after I've told him she's going to be fine. He walks towards me and he goes, "We made a giant leap forward, but 25% chance she makes it through the next 3 days." And I said, "So you're saying I'm one of the 25? And he said, "I guess, but she's going to have seizures." And I said, "No, doc, she's not. She's been healed by Jesus Christ. She's going to be just fine." And he kind of looked at me exasperated and turned around and walked away.
Okay.
That's day 2.
And then how is the progression each day? So now you guys, they're together, you and Rachel together. Are you taking shifts? What was going on?
No, we were usually there together. In fact, there was a waiting room that we found a couple of chairs in the hospital that would flatten out into beds. And so we would sleep there at the hospital for the first few days. Mm-hmm. On the second day, we were on the countdown now of the 3 days. And I remember looking up at the clock at the 3rd day at the same time I'd seen him in the morning and thinking, "Oh, wow, here we are. We're at the 3rd day." And we had different friends that would come that were feeding us exactly what we needed to hear. We had a friend, Rick Ryan, that said, "Don't allow any negativity in the room." We had my best friend, Ronnie Zent. He came and stayed with us for a week, basically just building us up, telling us that we were standing and going the right way. So.
Well, community means a lot,
Yes.
having your brothers and sisters in Christ to give you the word, to encourage you. But that's awesome. So question now, when you went home to stay, how did you fall right to sleep? Were you thinking all night? Were you praying all night? Like, what was going on, both of you, Rachel and Bud?
We would go home and watch Sports Center's top 10 plays of the day just to get a little form of entertainment. It was positive. There was nothing to lose from watching that. No news, no negative stuff. And then we would lay and watch Debbie and Alan Moore's testimony and fall asleep to that.
Wow. Meanwhile, Gina's just laying there resting, knowing that God's taking care of the whole thing. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. So now, Gina, I have a question. Did you know anything that was going on? Were you like
I must
aware?
have, because after I woke up, I told those people, the nurses, and be careful what you're saying in the room because they hear you. I heard you. So obviously you're there. You're there.
So okay, now
I want them not to be there. I can't imagine right now what they're doing, not letting family there while these people are sick. Because that,
well, I know.
and that, I remember when I was able to be aware that he was here, it's like, Bud, where are you? And I swear he pops up from a corner somewhere. It was like a file cabinet, and he was there. He was there. He just made his own little bed. But I needed that. I needed the comfort of my family, the faith of my family. So
What we would do after about the first 2 weeks, Julieann, is that Rachel and I would switch off spending the night there. And one night, what I did is I went in and I looked at all the medications that they were giving her just so I could understand it all, because she doesn't like medications. So at about the third week, she's awake. She knows what's going on. And but she can't really, she's got a trach, so she can't really speak, and they haven't put in the valve to help her speak yet. So it was about 3:00 in the morning. They come in to give her some medications, and she starts to get a little agitated with them. So I sat up in the corner and said, "Hon, it's okay. I've looked at the medications." And she, from laying in the bed, her hair is just flat. And so she turns around and looks over at me, then lays back down and turns up and looks at me again. So I thought, okay, I'm going to walk over there so she can see me. So I walked over and I talked to her for a little bit, and then they gave her the medications and everything was okay. But that was basically us. We would just lay out on this chair that was awesome. It would flatten out, and that's where we'd sleep.
Okay, so we kind of jumped a little bit into now she's awake. When did she wake up?
Well, there were some interesting things before she woke up. So
Okay.
We would always go in and tell her, Mama, wake up, like nudge her a little bit. It's time to wake up now. And if she hadn't woke up by the end of that day, the next day when we would come, okay, today's the day that she's waking up. And you got used to looking at her eyes. Her eyes were closed all the time. So we decided to open her eyes a little bit. And they had taken her off of some of the medication that was keeping her asleep. So it was about the time that she would wake up.
propofol.
And so we opened her eyes and we were standing over her, and she looked back and forth from one of us to the other. So we let go of her eyes like, whoa. And her eyes shut, and she slowly opened them again. And at that moment, that was like, wow, she's finally awake. And the celebratory, seeing it transform into God's healing is manifesting and becoming physical.
So what day was that? Like how many days had that been?
That was 17th day.
Okay. So was that an induced coma then for 17 days?
Part of it was in the beginning. It was induced with propofol. But they took her off of that at about the 12th, 13th day. So then she could slowly come out of the induced coma. And then when she did, it was interesting. So the next morning, she closed her eyes and went back to sleep. The next morning, we come in, Rachel and I, and she just, the bed's propped up a little bit. And she's sitting there looking straight ahead, just with her eyes open. So Rachel goes, "Dad, look, her eyes are open." So we set our stuff down that we've got, and we rush up to her, and she just sits there and looks at us. And
set our stuff down. We dropped everything we had and ran over the bedside.
And she, we asked her some questions and told her to blink if she understood. And we said, I don't remember what we asked. And she winked her eyes, to acknowledge who we were and everything. And, it was, from there, it was just steps and steps and steps where she was getting better and better. And so they moved her from the emergency ward of the just basically brain injuries on the 7th floor down to just the emergency of the 5th floor. And, she wasn't getting quite the care. I noticed a couple of times when I came back in, they hadn't cleaned her little valve or anything. And this is when a friend of ours came down, Robin Cosma. She's a
Martinez.
Robin Martinez. She's a respiratory therapist, and she showed us how to clean the little valve. So when it was dirty, we would clean it. And I complained to the head nurse, and boom, immediately she's back up on the 7th floor. And then that was where she was until the time that they checked her out.
And now how many days was that total?
It was right. It didn't quite make 6 weeks. So we were basically 4 weeks up in the 7th floor, 1 week down, and then 4 or 5 days back up. And what was amazing is that her progression kept getting better and better. There was one time where the doctor said, look, one of her lungs is collapsed, and he wanted to show me what it looked like, one that was working, one that wasn't. And he said, that could be the end of her. And I said, no, Jesus Christ has healed her 2,000 years ago. She's going to be just fine. And it's going to open up today. And it opened up that night.
Hadn't they heard you already by this point?
Right.
Well, and they did know the protocol of what I was going to be saying. She had what they call a mucus block. And we happened to be there when it happened, and what they did is they just blew it down into her lung. But Rachel and I were walking by him a couple hours later, and he said, that could be one of the things that could, be the end of her. She's going to have many more of those. And when he first said that, we hadn't had any hurdles in a few days to overcome. So it kind of gave me the chills, because I listened to what he said. I internalized those words for just that 10 seconds. And then I remember looking down at him and saying, she's been healed by Jesus Christ 2,000 years ago. And he goes, I know.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, and she's not going to have any more of those. And she never had another one.
So let's go back to that really quick. So you're just like on a walk.
Yeah, well, we had left her room. We were walking down the hallway, and he was seated with another doctor to our left. So when we were walking by him, he said he wanted to talk to me. And so he started talking to me about what had just happened a few hours earlier. And then that's when I engaged him back as far as the conversation was concerned. And then we left it at that.
When you said that you internalized what, you listened to him, what did you what'd that feel like? Did you feel like a fear for a moment? Like what happened?
Oh yeah. There was before it was like water off a duck's back. They'd say things, and I had my armor, I had my shield, I had Ephesians on. At this point in time, I didn't have it on. So when they said it, I had to step back mentally from what he just said and go back to, where do I stand? What do I stand on? And then I said it, I spoke it. I didn't say, oh yeah, you're right. Oh gosh, that sounds really bad. I didn't speak forth any of his negativity, just said back what Jesus Christ wanted me to say.
Right.
Say.
Well, what I'd like to do, because we have to end this episode, but we're going to come back for the next episode, part 2, and we're going to talk about the recovery, and because that's just as important as the actual incident. So, you guys, thank you so much for giving us, all of us, your time and just, pouring your heart out and letting us see, like, literally what it means to be Jesus in action and to stand on that word no matter what. So we'll see you guys next week, and it's going to be awesome to hear how Gina recovered in a way that there's no evidence of what happened. See you guys next week.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wow, that is quite a story. And just wait till you go to part 2, because now we're going to go into the recovery that is just as important as the actual incident itself. So stay tuned, go to part 2, because you're going to be blessed by this. And thank you so much for watching the journey. We are so excited that you guys are so encouraged by everything that we've put out so far. Our goal is to keep giving you story after story of encouragement and testimonies to show you that God is no respecter of persons. If he heals one, he heals them all. Thank you so much for subscribing. And just remember, you can go to healingjourneystoday.com and you can donate to help us out so we can get these to you as soon as they come. Thank you guys so much, and we will see you next week.